I never thought a phone call could shatter my entire world. But there I was, standing in my kitchen, the cold linoleum seeping through my socks. The phone pressed against my ear felt like a block of ice. The director's voice was calm, too calm, as she told me Grandma had passed away in her sleep. Just 1 week. 1 week since I signed those papers. 1 week since I walked out of that place and left her there. The guilt hit me like a physical blow, doubling me over the counter, my breath caught in my throat. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was only temporary. A voice in my head, cruel and immediate, whispered, "You did this." Let me rewind. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Jamie. I live in a small apartment in Chicago, the kind where you can hear your neighbors arguing through the walls. My life was normal. Work, bills, the usual grind. And then there was Grandma Rose. She was my rock. She raised me after my mom took off. Her house always smelled of cinnamon and old books. It was my safe place. But things started changing about 6 months ago. I'd go over on a Tuesday, and she'd have forgotten it was Tuesday. She'd call me by my mom's name. Then, one afternoon, I found her trying to make tea with the kettle empty on a cold burner. She was just staring at it, confused. My heart broke a little that day. I started going over more often. I'd cook for her, make sure she took her pills. I was juggling it all, but I was drowning. My work was suffering. I was exhausted, constantly looking at my phone, waiting for a call. The final straw was the fire. She tried to warm up some soup and forgot the stove on. A kitchen towel caught fire. Thank God she was okay, just shaken up. But standing in her smoky kitchen, seeing the black mark on the wall, the fear in her eyes, I knew I couldn't keep her safe anymore. Not by myself. I felt so helpless. It was the hardest decision I've ever made. We toured a few places. The one I chose, Sunset Gardens, looked nice online. It had good reviews. The lobby was bright, with fake plants and that sterile, clean smell. The director, a woman named Brenda with a tight smile, gave us the tour. She talked about activities and 24/7 care. Grandma held my hand the whole time, her grip surprisingly strong. She didn't say much. When we got to the room, a small, beige space with a single bed, she just looked at me. Her eyes, usually so full of light, were just empty. She looked lost. She whispered, "You're leaving me here, aren't you, sweetheart?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't even speak. I hugged her, breathing in her familiar scent of lavender powder, and I promised, "It's just for a little while, just until I can figure things out. I promise." I walked out of that room, and each step felt like I was walking on broken glass. I got in my car, and I sobbed until my throat was raw. The first few days were quiet. I called every day. The nurses said she was adjusting. She was quiet, they said, not eating much. I told myself it was just the transition. She needed time. I was trying to give myself time too, to get my life in order so I could bring her home. I was cleaning out her house, sorting through a lifetime of memories. Every photo, every trinket, was a fresh wave of guilt. Was I doing the right thing? The question haunted me. I went to visit her after 4 days. She was in the common room, sitting in a chair by the window. She was just staring out at the parking lot. She looked smaller, thinner. When I said her name, she turned slowly. It took a moment for her eyes to focus on me, and then she smiled. But it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, hello," she said. She didn't call me by my name. She didn't call me anything. We sat for an hour. I tried to talk about old times, but she just nodded, her hands folded neatly in her lap. It was like the best parts of her had already gone away. When I stood up to leave, she didn't ask when I was coming back. She just looked out the window again. That silence was worse than anything she could have said. And now, this. The phone call. 1 week. That's all it took. The director said it was peaceful. But was it? Or did she just give up? Did her heart break because she thought I'd abandon her? The questions are a tornado in my head, tearing everything apart. I have to go down there. I have to see her. I have to face what I've done. I have to know what happened in that place when I wasn't there. God, I feel so alone in this. This huge, crushing weight of regret. I keep imagining all of you watching this. Maybe you've been through something similar with someone you love. I find myself wondering how far this story could reach. Where are you even listening from? Comment below what city you're in, just so I know I'm not completely alone in this. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive to Sunset Gardens was a blur of traffic lights and my own ragged breathing. Every red light felt like a personal punishment, making me sit there and think. Think about her alone in that room. Think about that last hollow look in her eyes. I pulled into the parking lot, the same one she'd been staring out at. The sun was too bright. The world felt obscenely normal. I sat there for a minute, my forehead resting on the steering wheel. The vinyl was warm. I could smell the old coffee from my cup holder. Simple, stupid details that felt wrong when my grandma was gone. Walking through those automatic doors again was like walking into a nightmare. The same bright lobby, the same fake ficus tree in the corner, the same sterile smell like lemon-scented bleach. It was all exactly the same, but everything was different. A young woman at the front desk looked up. Her name tag said Chloe. She had a kind, sympathetic smile ready. She knew why I was there. Miss Evans, Brenda is expecting you. I'm so sorry for your loss. Her words were like a script. They bounced off me. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She led me down a hallway. I heard a game show playing loudly from a common room. I heard someone coughing. Life was just continuing here. How could it? Brenda's office was at the end of the hall. The door was open. She was sitting behind a large, tidy desk. She stood up when I entered, her face arranged into that same professionally somber expression. "Jamie, please, have a seat." Her voice was soft, controlled. I didn't want to sit. I felt like if I sat down, I would collapse and never get back up. I stayed standing, my arms wrapped tightly around myself. "What happened?" I managed to ask. The question was barely a whisper. Brenda gestured to the chair again. "Please." Reluctantly, I sank into the plush chair opposite her. It was too comfortable. It felt wrong. As I said on the phone, Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep last night. The night nurse did her rounds at 2 a.m., and everything was fine. When she returned at 4 a.m., she had passed. Brenda folded her hands on the desk. It was very gentle. No struggle. I stared at her. But she was okay. The nurses said she was adjusting. A little quiet, but okay. My voice was getting louder, edged with a panic I couldn't control. She wasn't sick. She was just sad. Brenda's expression didn't change. Sometimes, with residents of her age and with her condition, these things can happen very suddenly. We did everything by the book. Her chart is right here. She tapped a manila folder on her desk. "Her condition?" I asked. "What condition?" "She had some memory issues. She forgot things. That's why she was here. She didn't have a heart condition. She wasn't on any serious medication." "It's often more than just memory, Jamie," Brenda said. her tone shifting to one of gentle education. There can be a general decline, a failure to thrive. When an elderly person loses their home, their routine, it can be a profound shock to the system, spiritually and physically. Her words landed like a physical blow. A failure to thrive. Was that a medical term for a broken heart? For giving up? I felt the air leave my lungs. This was my fault. She was confirming it in the politest, most clinical way possible. I want to see her, I said, my voice trembling. Brenda looked slightly uncomfortable. Are you sure? It's often better to remember them as they were. I need to see her. I was not asking. She nodded slowly and stood up. Of course, follow me. We left her office and walked down a different hallway, one I hadn't been in before. It was quieter, cooler. The lights were dimmer. We stopped at a door marked Private. Brenda opened it. The room was small and stark. It smelled strongly of antiseptic. There was a gurney in the middle of the room, and a shape was lying on it, covered with a crisp white sheet. My legs felt like water. Brenda stood by the door, giving me space. I forced myself to walk forward. Each step echoed in the silent room. I reached the gurney. My hand was shaking so violently, I could barely control it. I reached out and gently pulled back the sheet from her face. It was her. But it wasn't. Her skin was waxy and pale. Her beautiful silver hair was flat against her head. Her eyes were closed, her face relaxed into an expression I hadn't seen in months. Peace. But it was the peace of nothingness. The life, the light, the love that was my Grandma Rose. It was gone. All that was left was a shell. A sob tore out of me, harsh and ugly in the quiet room. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth. This was real. It was final. She was gone because I put her here. I let the sheet fall back into place. I couldn't look anymore. The image of her, so still and empty, was already burned into my brain forever. I turned and rushed out of the room, past Brenda, down the hall. I didn't stop until I burst through the front doors and into the parking lot. I leaned against the rough brick wall of the building, gulping in the fresh air, trying to erase the smell of that room from my nose. I had thought the guilt was bad before. Now it was a living thing inside me, gnawing at my insides. She didn't die of old age. She died of a broken heart. She died because I failed her. I drove home on autopilot. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it. A half-empty coffee cup on the counter. Mail piled up by the door. It all felt alien, like I was walking into a stranger's life. I went straight to my couch and curled into a ball, pulling the blanket over my head. The silence was deafening. There would be no more phone calls to check on, no more visits to plan. Just this. Nothing. The next few days were a fog. I moved from my bed to my couch and back again. I didn't answer calls. I didn't check my email. The world had shrunk to the four walls of my apartment and the relentless, looping tape of my regrets in my head. I had to do something. I couldn't just lie there and let the guilt consume me. I had to understand. I had to know if there was something more, something they weren't telling me. Was it really just failure to thrive? Or was there negligence? Did someone miss something? Did she call out for me and no one came? I dragged myself into the shower. The hot water stung my skin, but it woke me up a little. I made a strong pot of coffee. I sat at my small kitchen table, my laptop open. I opened a blank document. I titled it, Questions. I started writing down everything, every interaction I'd had with the staff, the names of the nurses I'd spoken to, The date of my last visit, her behavior, the fact that she wasn't eating. I wrote down Brenda's exact words, failure to thrive. This wasn't just about grief anymore. This was about answers. I needed her medical records. I needed to talk to the staff who were there that night. I needed to know what my grandma's last days were really like. Was I looking for a villain to blame because the truth, that my decision led to this, was too horrible to bear? Maybe. But I had to look. I had to dig for her, for the promise I broke. It starts with a single question, doesn't it? The one that changes everything. What if it wasn't peaceful? What if her last moments were spent scared and lonely, wondering why I wasn't there? That thought is a cold knife in my chest, and I can't pull it out. I have to know the truth, no matter how much it destroys me. I spent the next week in a daze. My apartment felt like a tomb. Everywhere I looked, there was a reminder of her. A photo of us at the lake house. The ugly ceramic vase she made me in her pottery class. I couldn't touch any of it. The silence was the worst part. No phone ringing. No worrying about what the next call might bring. The worry was over, replaced by a hollow, aching certainty. I had to get out of the house. I forced myself to go to the grocery store. I walked the aisles like a ghost. I found myself in the tea section. I stared at the box of her favorite chamomile. My hand reached for it automatically. Then I remembered. I pulled my hand back like the box was on fire. I had to leave my cart right there in the middle of the aisle and walk out. I sat in my car and cried until my eyes were swollen. The funeral was small. Just a few of her old friends from the neighborhood, their faces etched with a similar kind of loss. They patted my arm and said things like, "She's at peace now, and she loved you so much." Their words were meant to comfort, but they just felt like accusations. I was the one who robbed her of her peace. I was the one she loved, and I put her in that place. After the service, I was cleaning up the few floral arrangements. One of the nurses from Sunset Gardens had come. Her name was Maria. I remembered her from my visits. She was the one who always had a warm smile for Grandma, who would take an extra minute to fix her hair. She approached me cautiously. "Jamie, I'm so sorry. Thank you for coming," I said, my voice flat. I was just going through the motions. She hesitated, twisting her hands. I shouldn't be here, but I liked your grandma. She was a sweet lady." I just nodded, not sure what to say. "She talked about you all the time, you know," Maria said softly. "She kept a little photo of you by her bed. She'd show it to anyone who would listen." A fresh wave of pain washed over me. She was showing people my picture while I was miles away, trying to forget the guilt by organizing her silverware. Maria looked around, making sure no one was listening. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The last couple of days, she was different, more withdrawn. She stopped getting out of bed. We tried, but she just refused. My breath hitched. "What do you mean, refused?" "She just lost the will," Maria said, her eyes full of a sad understanding. "It happens sometimes. They call it giving up. She stopped eating almost entirely. We were supposed to document her intake, but..." She trailed off, looking guilty. "But what?" I pressed, my heart starting to hammer in my chest. "Look, I could get in huge trouble for this," she whispered, her eyes darting around again. "The chart they showed you, it might not tell the whole story. There were a few nights we were short-staffed, really short. Checks might have been rushed." She looked at me, her meaning clear. "I just thought you should know. I'm sorry." She turned and walked away quickly, leaving me standing there, my mind reeling. Short-staffed, rushed checks. It wasn't just a broken heart. It was neglect. A cold, hard fury began to mix with my grief. Brenda's had looked me in the eye and talked about Failure to thrive. She hadn't mentioned a staffing problem. She hadn't mentioned my grandma refusing to eat. I drove home, but I wasn't going back to my couch. That fog of despair was burning away, replaced by a sharp, clear anger. I went straight to my laptop. The document titled Questions was still open. I started a new one. I called it Evidence. I began researching. I looked up state laws for nursing home staffing ratios. I read through countless complaint forums and review sites for Sunset Gardens. My heart sank. It wasn't just me. There were other stories. Vague, anonymous posts about missed medications, about residents being left in soiled beds for too long, about families feeling lied to. None of it was solid proof, but it was a pattern. A horrible, sickening pattern. I needed to see her official records. Brenda had mentioned her chart. I had a right to them, didn't I? I was her next of kin. I found a template for a formal records request letter online. My hands were shaking as I filled in the blanks. I demanded a complete copy of my grandmother's medical chart, her care plan, and all staffing logs for the week she was there. I printed it out and signed my name with a force that nearly tore the paper. I put it in an envelope and drove directly to the post office to send it certified mail. I wanted a signature proving they received it. The waiting was agony. Every day, I checked the tracking. It was delivered. Someone signed for it. Now, the silence from them was louder than any sound. A week passed. Nothing. I called Brenda's office. Her assistant put me on hold and came back to say they were processing the request. It felt like a brush-off, a stall tactic. I decided to go down there. I wasn't going to call ahead. I walked through those automatic doors for the third time, and the sterile smell now made my stomach turn. Chloe was at the front desk again. "I'm here to see Brenda," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, clicking on her computer. "No, but I'm not leaving until I speak with her about my grandmother's records." Chloe's polite smile faltered. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly into it, and then nodded. "She can see you for a few minutes." Brenda's office was the same. Neat, impersonal. She didn't offer me a seat this time. "Jamie, I received your request. As I told you on the phone, we are processing it." "These things take time." "How much time?" I asked, standing my ground. "It's been a week. She was only here for a week. How many pages could there possibly be?" "It's not just about the number of pages," she said, her tone becoming clipped. "There are privacy protocols. We have to redact information about other residents." "I'm not asking about other residents. I'm asking about my grandmother, Rose Evans. I want to know why a healthy woman died in your care after 1 week." My voice was rising, but I didn't care. "One of your nurses came to the funeral, Maria. She told me you were short-staffed. She told me my grandmother stopped eating and the checks were rushed. Is that in the chart? Is that the failure to thrive you were talking about?" Brenda's face tightened. The professional mask slipped for just a second, and I saw a flash of annoyance. "I cannot discuss personnel matters or the specifics of care based on hearsay, and I would advise any employee against speaking to family members in that manner." That was it. That was the confirmation I needed. She wasn't denying it. She was threatening the employee who told me. The pieces were clicking into place, and the picture they formed was monstrous. "So it's true," I said, my voice quiet and cold. "You weren't watching her. You left her to die." "That is a gross mischaracterization," Brenda snapped. "We provide excellent care here. If you continue to make these kinds of accusations, I will have to ask you to leave and refer this matter to our legal department." Legal department. The words were meant to scare me, and a part of me was scared. But a bigger part was furious. This wasn't about money or lawsuits. This was about my grandma. This was about the promise I made to her in that beige room. I had failed her once. I wouldn't fail her again by staying quiet. I looked Brenda right in the eye. Send it to your legal department. I'm not going away. I'm going to find out what happened here. Every last detail. I turned and walked out of her office. My heart was pounding, but for the first time since that awful phone call, I didn't feel helpless. I felt a purpose. A dark, grim purpose. I had a name now. It wasn't just guilt. It was negligence. And I was going to prove it. The fight was just beginning, and I knew it would be ugly. But the thought of my grandma, alone in that bed, giving up because no one was really there for her, that thought fueled me. It turned my grief into a weapon. What do you do when the people who are supposed to care are the ones who cause the harm? Where do you even start? My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat in my car in the Sunset Gardens parking lot for a long time. The steering wheel felt cold under my grip. Brenda's words echoed in my head. Legal department. She thought that would shut me up. She thought I was just a grieving granddaughter who would eventually go away. I wouldn't. I drove home, but my apartment didn't feel like a place to hide anymore. It felt like a command center. The first thing I did was go back to my laptop. The evidence document was open. I started a new section. Witnesses. I typed Maria's name at the top. She was a risk. Brenda had all but threatened her. I couldn't go back and put her job in more danger. She had been brave enough to talk to me once. That might be all I got. So I had to find others. I spent the rest of the day and late into the night online. I wasn't just reading reviews anymore. I was hunting. I found a state database for nursing home inspections. I typed in Sunset Gardens. My heart sank. There were pages of reports. Most were minor. A broken handrail, a food temperature log not filled out correctly. But then I found it. A report from 6 months ago. It cited them for insufficient nursing staff to meet the needs of the residents. It was a violation, a real official violation. They had been fined. They were supposed to have fixed it. They hadn't fixed it. Maria said they were short-staffed. The state said they were short-staffed. It was a pattern, a dangerous, deadly pattern. The next morning, I made a list. I needed to talk to people. But who? I couldn't just walk into Sunset Gardens and start interrogating nurses. I remembered something my grandma used to say. If you want to know what's really happening, talk to the people who have no reason to lie. The families. I went back to those complaint forums. This time, I didn't just read. I started private messaging people. My fingers trembled as I typed the first one. My name is Jamie. My grandmother, Rose Evans, died at Sunset Gardens last week. I'm trying to understand what happened. I saw your post. Would you be willing to talk to me? I sent a dozen messages. I felt like I was throwing bottles into a dark ocean. I didn't expect any answers. But 2 days later, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. My voice was a nervous whisper. Hello? Is this Jamie? A woman's voice asked. She sounded tired. You messaged me about Sunset Gardens. About my father. Her name was Susan. Her father had been at Sunset Gardens for 3 months last year. He fell and broke his hip. The call light was right by his hand, she told me, her voice cracking. He pressed it. He waited. No one came for over an hour. He tried to get up himself. That's when he fell. She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. The report they gave me said he was restless and non-compliant with bed rest. They made it sound like it was his fault. My blood ran cold. It was the same story. Different person, same neglect. Another person emailed me, a man named David. His wife had early-onset dementia. She was only 60. They kept her so sedated, he wrote. She was a zombie. I complained. They said it was for her agitation. I found out later they were giving her double the dose on the nights they were short-staffed. It was easier for them. Each story was a piece of the puzzle. Each one confirmed what I already knew in my gut. This wasn't about one sad old lady dying of a broken heart. This was about a system that was broken, a place that cut corners, a business that valued profit over people. I printed everything out. The state reports, the printed emails, the notes from my conversations. I bought a big corkboard and pinned it all up on my living room wall. It looked like something from a crime show, my own little wall of conspiracy. But it wasn't a conspiracy. It was the truth. The certified mail request for the records had a deadline. They had 30 days to respond. I marked the date on my calendar in red. Every day that passed felt like a small victory for them. I called Brenda's office once a week. Her assistant always had the same answer. It's being processed. I started driving by Sunset Gardens at different times of the day. Not to go in, just to watch. I'd park across the street. I saw the shift changes. I saw the staff coming and going. They always looked rushed, stressed. I saw a nurse I recognized from my visits, a woman named Carol, smoking a cigarette out back, looking at her watch like every second was precious. One evening, around 7 p.m., I saw something that made my heart stop. An ambulance was parked at the back entrance. Its lights were off. It wasn't in a hurry. 2 EMTs were slowly loading a gurney into the back. There was a shape on it, covered with a sheet. Just like my grandma. I felt sick. Was this normal? How often did this happen? I needed to get inside. I needed to see it when they weren't expecting me. I decided to visit a different nursing home, a nice one on the other side of town. I pretended I was looking for a place for a fictional uncle. The director gave me a full tour. It was different. It smelled like fresh coffee, not antiseptic. There was laughter coming from a common room. The staff looked me in the eye and smiled. They weren't rushing. It was proof that it didn't have to be this way. Sunset Gardens was a choice, a bad one. I went back to my car and cried. My grandma didn't have to die there. She could have been in a place like this. If I had just looked harder, if I had just tried more, the guilt tried to swallow me again. But I looked at the photo of her I kept on my dashboard. She was smiling. She believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I couldn't let that guilt win. I had to turn it into action. The 30-day deadline was approaching. I knew they would send something, a heavily redacted packet that would tell me nothing. I had to be ready. I started researching lawyers. Medical malpractice, wrongful death. The words felt ugly and clinical. They didn't capture what this was about. This wasn't about malpractice. It was about betrayal. The day the envelope arrived, my hands were so sweaty I could barely tear it open. It was from Sunset Gardens legal counsel, not from Brenda, of course. I pulled out the stack of papers. It was thinner than I expected. My grandma's chart. I sat at my kitchen table and spread them out. It was worse than I thought. The records were a joke. Vague, repetitive notes. Resident resting in room. Offered meal, refused. vitals stable. There were huge gaps in time, 8-hour stretches with no documentation at all. The failure to thrive diagnosis was scribbled at the end, like an afterthought, but it was the staffing logs that made the air leave my lungs. For the last 2 nights of my grandma's life, the logs showed only one certified nursing assistant for the entire hall. One person for 20 residents. The state requirement was 1 for every 8. They were operating at less than half the legal staff. I had it, in black and white, from their own records. They were so short-staffed that it was impossible for them to provide adequate care. It was mathematically impossible. My grandma didn't just give up. She was left alone. She was ignored. She was a number in an understaffed, overworked system. I picked up the phone. I called the first lawyer on my list. I told him I had the proof. He listened quietly. When I was done, he said the words I had been waiting to hear. "Jamie," he said, "you have a case." I hung up the phone and looked at the corkboard on my wall. All the pieces were connected. The state reports, the family stories, the official records. It was all there. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a long, hard fight. But for the first time, I wasn't fighting just for my grandma. I was fighting for Susan's father, for David's wife, for the person on that gurney I saw in the ambulance. I was fighting for everyone they thought they could forget. The guilt is still there. It probably always will be. But now, it's got a partner, a fierce, burning determination. I will make them answer for this. I will make sure they can't do this to anyone else. I made a promise to my grandma in that quiet room. I failed the first part. I won't fail the second. I drove to the law firm the next morning. My hands were clenched so tight on the steering wheel, my knuckles turned white. The building was all glass and steel, intimidating. I walked through the automatic doors into a lobby that was too quiet. Everything smelled like expensive coffee and lemon cleaner. I gave my name to the receptionist, my voice shaking just a little. Mr. Evans's office was nothing like Brenda's. It was warm. There were books on the shelves and family photos on the desk. He stood up and shook my hand. His grip was firm. "Jamie," he said, "I've looked over the documents you emailed. Please, have a seat." I sat in the big leather chair, feeling small. I watched him as he spread my papers out on his desk. My evidence document, the printed state reports, the copies of the staffing logs. He was quiet for a long time, just reading. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My heart was beating so loud I was sure he could hear it. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were serious. "This is a very strong pattern, Jamie. The state violation for staffing, the family testimonials, and now, their own records proving they were operating with a skeleton crew." He tapped the staffing log with his finger. "This is a breach of the standard of care. It's undeniable." Hearing him say it, in this official office, made it real in a new way. It wasn't just my anger anymore. It was a fact. "What happens now?" I asked. My throat was dry. "We file a lawsuit," he said, his voice calm and steady. "A wrongful death suit. We'll name the facility and the parent corporation. They're going to fight it, Jamie. They have deep pockets. They'll try to drag this out, hoping you'll get tired and give up." "I won't," I said, and my voice didn't shake this time. He gave me a small, grim smile. "I believe you. The first thing they'll do is file a motion to dismiss. They'll claim your grandmother was elderly, that her death was inevitable. We have to be ready for that." For the next hour, we went over everything. He asked me questions I hadn't thought of. Did my grandma have a living will? What were her exact words when I visited her? He wrote everything down. He explained the process, discovery, depositions. It could take years. Years, I whispered. The word felt heavy. It's a marathon, not a sprint, he said. But with this evidence, I'm confident we can get to a jury, and a jury will see what you see. I signed the retainer agreement right there. My signature looked small on the big legal document. I was officially suing Sunset Gardens. As I walked out of the building, the sun felt too bright. I got in my car and just sat there for a minute. I had started a war. A few weeks later, I was served. Not by the lawsuit. I was the one suing. I was served with a subpoena. Sunset Gardens lawyers were demanding my personal laptop. They wanted all my documents, my emails, my search history. They wanted to see my evidence file and all my private messages with the other families. It felt like a violation, like they were trying to reach into my apartment and rifle through my most private thoughts. Mr. Evans warned me this would happen. He said they would try to make me look like a crazy, vindictive person. I had to hand it over. I had to give them everything. The day I dropped my laptop off with the IT expert Mr. Evans hired, I felt sick. It was like giving them a piece of my brain. All my late-night research, my raw grief, my furious notes, they were going to read it all. They were going to pick it apart. The waiting was the worst part. Life became a cycle of waiting. Waiting for court dates. Waiting for their lawyers to respond to our motions. Waiting for some kind of resolution. I still went to work. I still came home. But my mind was always there, in that legal battle. I started having dreams about my grandma. Not the good memories. I dreamed of her in that bed, calling out for me, and I was stuck behind a glass wall, pounding on it, unable to get to her. I'd wake up with my heart racing, the sheets tangled around me. One afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Evans. "They've made an offer, Jamie." I was at the grocery store, holding a box of cereal. I put it back on the shelf. An offer for what? A settlement. They want to make this go away. My first feeling was a surge of victory. They were scared. They knew they were going to lose. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He told me the number. It was a lot of money. More money than I had ever seen. It was enough to pay off my student loans, my car, and still have a huge amount left over. For a second, I imagined it. I could walk away. I could be done with the lawyers, the nightmares, the constant anger. "What do you think?" I asked him. "It's a significant offer," he said, his tone careful and neutral. "It tells me they do not want this to see the inside of a courtroom. They know their exposure is high. But Jamie, you need to understand what a settlement means. They will demand confidentiality. You will have to sign a document saying you will never speak about this again. To anyone, ever." The image of the money vanished, replaced by Susan's tired voice on the phone. They made it sound like it was his fault. I thought of David's wife, turned into a zombie for convenience. I thought of the person under that sheet on the gurney. This was never about the money. It was about the truth. "If I take it," I said, my voice finding its strength, "nothing changes. They write a check and they keep doing what they're doing. They keep neglecting people. They keep letting people die." "That is a distinct possibility," Mr. Evans said quietly. I looked down the cereal aisle. It was so normal. People were just buying their food, living their lives. I wanted that normalcy back so badly, it was a physical ache. But I knew I couldn't have it. Not this way. "No," I said. The word was final. "Tell them no. We're going to court." I hung up the phone. My hand was trembling, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. I had just turned down a life-changing amount of money. I had chosen the harder path. The guilt that had been my constant companion seemed to shift. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. I had made a choice she would have been proud of. The fight was getting uglier, but I was getting stronger. I was no longer just a grieving granddaughter. I was a threat, and I was only just getting started. What would you have done if it was your family? Could you have walked away from that check, knowing what it would silence? The phone call with Mr. Evans changed everything. They were scared. I had turned down their money, and now they had to face me in a courtroom. The next few months were a blur of legal paperwork and preparation. Mr. Evans and his team were like generals planning for war. We went through what's called discovery. That's just a fancy legal word for turning over every single rock. I had to sit for a deposition. That's where the other side's lawyers get to ask you questions under oath. I was so nervous the morning of. I put on my best suit, the one I bought for job interviews after college. I sat in a conference room that was even quieter than Mr. Evans' office. A court reporter sat in the corner, her fingers poised over her little machine. Sunset Gardens' lawyer was a man named Mr. Sterling. He had a cold smile and expensive shoes. He started with easy questions: my name, my job, my relationship with my grandma. Then he got mean. "Would you say you were a devoted granddaughter, Miss Evans?" he asked, his voice slick. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "Yet you placed her in a facility you now claim was negligent. You didn't visit for the first 2 weeks, isn't that correct?" He was trying to make me look guilty. He was trying to say I was the neglectful one. I felt my face get hot. Mr. Evans had prepared me for this. I took a slow breath. "I trusted a state-licensed facility to do its job," I said. "A job I am not trained to do. And I visited her as soon as I could get the time off work." He kept pushing. He asked about my campaign against Sunset Gardens. He called my corkboard a wall of obsession. He made it sound like I was some crazy person with a vendetta, not a person who just wanted the truth. I held my ground. I looked him right in the eye. I talked about Susan's father. I talked about David's wife. I made him hear their names. When it was over, my legs felt like jelly. Mr. Evans walked me out. "You did great, Jamie," he said. "He was fishing, and you didn't bite." The trial date was set. The weeks leading up to it were the longest of my life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I kept rehearsing what I would say in my head. I went to the cemetery and sat by my grandma's headstone. I told her I was sorry it had come to this. I told her I hoped I was doing the right thing. The day the trial started, I wore the same suit. The courtroom was smaller than I thought it would be. The wood was dark and polished. The jury was a group of 12 ordinary people. They looked tired, bored. I needed them to see. I needed them to understand. Our side went first. Mr. Evans laid it all out. He showed the jury the staffing logs. He put the state violation reports up on a big screen. He called an expert witness, a nurse who ran a different nursing home. She explained what the standard of care was supposed to be. She looked at the logs and said plain as day, it was impossible to provide adequate care with 1 CNA for 20 residents. You are essentially guaranteeing that someone will be neglected. Then it was my turn to testify. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking a plank. I swore to tell the truth. Mr. Evans asked me simple, quiet questions. "Tell us about your grandmother, Jamie." I looked at the jury. I didn't look at Mr. Sterling. I talked about her. I talked about how she taught me to bake apple pie. I talked about the way she always had a jar of lemon drops in her purse. I talked about her laugh. I made her a person for them, not just a name on a chart. Then I talked about the last time I saw her. I described the smell, the way her hand felt in mine, the sound of her voice, so small and confused. I told them about finding her, cold and alone. I didn't cry. My voice was steady, but I let them see the pain. I let it sit in the quiet room. When it was Mr. Sterling's turn to cross-examine me, he tried again. He tried to make it about me, my choices, my guilt. Isn't it true, Miss Evans, that this lawsuit is really about assuaging your own guilt for putting your grandmother in this home? I looked right at him, and then I looked at the jury. This lawsuit is about the truth, I said. My guilt is my burden to carry. Their negligence is their crime to answer for. He had nothing else to say after that. They put Brenda on the stand. She looked different, smaller. She was no longer the friendly director. She was a corporate employee. She had to answer for the staffing logs. She tried to blame it on a nationwide staffing shortage. She said they did the best they could. Mr. Evans didn't even have to ask many questions. He just showed her the log from the night my grandma died. He showed her the state law. He asked, "Is operating at less than half the legal requirement your definition of the best you can?" She had no answer. She just looked down at her hands. The closing arguments were the final push. Mr. Sterling talked about the challenges of elder care. He talked about my grandma's age, her failure to thrive. He made it sound like her death was just nature taking its course. Then Mr. Evans stood up. He didn't yell. He was calm. He walked over to the jury box and leaned on the railing. "This case is not about old age," he said. "It is about choices. Sunset Gardens made a choice. They chose to save money on staff. They chose to ignore state law. They chose to let Rose Evans, and who knows how many others, lie in their beds, alone and unattended. They made a business decision that human dignity was less important than the bottom line. You have the power to tell them that choice has a consequence. You have the power to put a value on a life that they treated as worthless." The jury went out to deliberate. I went home and stared at the wall. I couldn't do anything. The hours ticked by. 1 hour. 2. 5. I started to get scared. What if they believed Mr. Sterling? What if they thought I was just a guilty granddaughter, looking for someone to blame? The call came after 8 hours. The jury had reached a verdict. Walking back into that courtroom, I thought I might pass out. My heart was a drum in my ears. The judge came in. The jury filed in. They wouldn't look at me. That's a bad sign, I thought. My hands were ice cold. The judge asked the foreman if they had reached a verdict. He said yes. He passed a piece of paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The judge read it, his face giving nothing away. He passed it back. The foreman stood up. He cleared his throat. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the lights. On the count of wrongful death, we, the jury, find the defendants, Sunset Gardens and its parent corporation, liable. I didn't hear the number at first. I just heard the word liable. They were responsible. They were at fault. It was true. It was all true. Then I heard the number, the damages. It was more than the settlement offer. A lot more. It was a number meant to punish. A number meant to send a message. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I felt quiet. A deep, profound quiet. It was over. The fight was over. Mr. Sterling looked pale. Brenda had her face in her hands. Mr. Evans put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Jamie." Outside the courthouse, the sun was setting. Reporters tried to talk to me, but I just shook my head and kept walking. I got in my car and drove straight to the cemetery. I stood there in the fading light, in front of her stone. Rosalind Evans, beloved mother and grandmother. "It's over, Grandma," I whispered. "We won." I didn't feel her presence or hear her voice. It was just me and the wind in the trees. But I felt a peace I hadn't felt in over a year. The guilt was still there, a small, quiet stone in my heart. But it wasn't the whole story anymore. Next to it was this knowledge that I had fought for her. I had stood up when it would have been easier to sit down. I had told the truth when they tried to bury it. I got a check in the mail a month later. I didn't know what to do with it. It felt dirty. I paid off my debts. I put some in savings. And then I started a nonprofit. A small one, just me and a website. It's a resource for families looking for nursing homes. It has a list of questions to ask, red flags to look for. I use the rest of the money to fund it. I call it Rose's Voice. Sunset Gardens is still open. They paid the fine. They're probably still cutting corners. But they know someone is watching now. They know a jury of their peers looked at what they did and said it was wrong. I still think about her every day. I still miss her, but the nightmares have stopped. Now when I dream of her, she's in her kitchen, flour on her hands, smiling at me. She's at peace. And finally, for the first time since I got that phone call, I am too. This was my story. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I would do it all over again. Because silence has a price too, and I wasn't willing to pay it anymore. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you of someone you love, please let me know. Hit that like button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means I can keep sharing stories that matter. Thank you for being here with me until the end.